stupid feminists are, you might be Sargon of Akkad. Often highly intelligent, but actually this one doesn't count. Lack of empathy. For example, if you think it's okay to use a developmental disorder that real people actually struggle with as an insult for people you don't like, if you think it's okay to use a photograph of an unrelated person as a clickbait thumbnail on a video calling people autistic, if you defended Elliot Rodger, and yes, Sargon defended Elliot Rodger.
And no, it's not all men who act this way, but you know what? It's way too f***ing many.
Which is ironic considering that before your stupid social justice feminine bullshit, it didn't happen on this scale. It's crazy. This is a disease of the modern age. You are responsible for perpetuating it by disenfranchising these poor fucking guys who don't have any options left. When someone takes the option of absolute, insanely last resort, you have to wonder what kind of system is producing them. And I tell you what, Lacey, it is a fucking feminist system that's doing this.
VIP and our resistance contact are hunkered down. Once you've secured the targets, move to the designated coordinates for extraction. Keep your heads up out there, people.
I know there's going to be a few people who comment on this video saying, it was a joke. Sargon's just joking. It's a joke video. It's not meant to be taken seriously. It's all a joke. My response to that is, no, it's not. That Elliot Rodger, well, you get the point. Now I know there's going to be a few people who comment on this video saying, it was a joke. Sargon's just joking. It's a joke video. It's not meant to be taken seriously. It's all a joke. My response to that is, no, it's not. Hello there. So okay, I know I said I was burnt out on Stefan Molyneux, but the other day I happened to watch Star Wars The Force Awakens again, and I couldn't resist going to take another look at Stefan's video about it. In my first video about Stefan, I included a clip of him talking about Star Wars and what he sees as its anti-family, anti-male message. Now the purpose of that clip was to demonstrate what I see as Stefan's anti-woman ideology affecting his approach to art, as well as, to a certain degree, everything else. So the purpose of this video is, in part, to expand on that point. Now the idea that one's particular worldview colours one's understanding of art is certainly not specific to Stefan. It happens to everyone. You know, I have my own biases and leanings that I bring with me when I watch a movie or read a book or whatever. So I'm not criticising Stefan just for having opinions. And I'm generally a fan of what we'll call unconventional interpretations of art. At the least, I think they're usually fun to think about. I've seen it argued, for instance, that Hamlet is a gay character. And there's certain things in the play one can point to that could be interpreted as supporting this. His rejection of Ophelia, his affection for Horatio and so on, and as well as certain lines of dialogue here and there. However, one needs to be careful with these sorts of interpretations. It's easy to cross over from speculations to declarations. There's a line between speculating that Hamlet could be gay and declaring Hamlet to be gay. And there's a much bigger line between speculating that Hamlet could be gay and declaring Hamlet to be gay based on the scene where he has sex with Horatio, which doesn't happen. You know, you've started misconstruing the text at that point, and you've entered into the realm of just being objectively wrong about things. And I mention this now because Stefan makes a few claims about the characters and events of The Force Awakens that I think go beyond individual interpretation and end up just being directly contradicted by the movie. So that's my aim with this video. I'm going to highlight the times I think Stefan is incorrect and present a counter-interpretation of the material. But before we talk about The Force Awakens directly, we'll start with a few thoughts on the fantasy genre.
In most epic stories, parents are conveniently removed from the home, allowing the young hero to easily slide under the tutelage of a warrior master and learn the ways of obedience and drama and war. In the original Star Wars, family life was portrayed as mundane and humiliating as a young Luke Skywalker was expected to work productively on his uncle's farm. Historically, epics tend to be fantasies that feed the murder lust of the young, who were needed by the aristocracy to wage war on their behalf. The word adventure basically means learn the dehumanizing joy of murdering for your masters. In these stories, boring parents are replaced by wise, hypnotic elders who teach young men, and now young women, the excitement and joys of war. This conveniently allows the authority of the state to displace the authority of parents, transitioning young men from pimply-faced teens to hardened warriors serving their economic and political masters. Hey, who wants to work for a banker when you can kill for a banker?
So Stefan starts out with something that I agree with here. He is correct that the fantasy genre usually takes the protagonist's parents out of the picture, either before the story or during the opening act. But he claims this is down to some anti-family and/or pro-violence message. You know, freed from their family constraints, the protagonist can now go off killing people under the guidance of an older warrior. And I can't really agree with that interpretation. I think the real reason is mainly just narrative in nature. You know, removing the parents is often a necessary step to force the protagonist into action. If Luke, for instance, had stayed on the farm and not followed Obi-Wan, he wouldn't have a story. Nobody wants to watch Luke work a boring farm job for 2 hours. Regardless, I think Star Wars is the wrong series to make this point about, to be honest. Neither of Luke's masters, Obi-Wan or Yoda, teach Luke to attack anyone. In fact, they seem to prefer non-violent means of resolving conflicts.
You can't win, but there are alternatives to fighting.
A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack.
Obi-Wan sneaks his way past stormtroopers that he could kill, and he even allows himself to be killed. And the culmination of Luke's story has him defeating the Emperor by explicitly refusing to fight. This seems more of an anti-violence message to me, really, rather than a pro-violence one.
In the new film, we meet Finn. Now, Finn is a stormtrooper who was cloned, raised without parents, and trained to be a mindless, obedient, killing robot pretty much from birth. As an adult, he has a strong conscience. He is engaging, charming, funny, enthusiastic, and, for obvious reasons, mindlessly horny. In other words, despite being raised in conditions that your average African child soldier would find utterly horrifying, he is a perfectly well-adjusted, mentally healthy, courageous, he's a good team player, he's socially poised, warm, and funny. This mirrors the fantasy of Harry Potter, who was also endlessly abused as a child and shares most of this eerie, steroid mental health characteristics that Finn has. This denial of the
No problem, boss. I'm on it. Got it covered.
Are you okay? We've got Advent here. That armor's
trauma is the fundamental reason for the consistent re-emergence of intergalactic evil, not just in Star Wars, but in all these stories, and in the world as well.
Intergalactic evil? Yikes. What does Stefan know that we don't? So, a few minor points about Finn here. Firstly, Stefan says that he's a clone, but he isn't.
I'm a stormtrooper. Like all of them, I was taken from a family I'll never know.
Secondly, when is Finn mindlessly horny? The Force Awakens is rather sexless, to be honest. The only thing I can think of here is when Finn asks Rey if she has a boyfriend. But that's about as far as the movie takes that romance, to be honest. He's hardly mindlessly horny. So anyway, the effects of childhood trauma. Why don't fantasy films with orphaned or abused protagonists show the negative effects of such neglect and or abuse? Well, for a start, sometimes they do. You know, I'd argue that The Force Awakens does even, but we'll get to that later. For now, let's carry on and answer the question anyway, for funsies. So I'd argue that instead of not showing these effects, fantasy stories like Star Wars and Harry Potter generally do have them, just at a reduced level. You know, it's there, but it's not generally enough to prevent the protagonist from progressing through the story. And the reason why is in the name, really. Fantasy. These works are escapist fiction. You know, they show at first average protagonists with mundane lives who are suddenly thrust into some grand adventure. You know, you thought you were just some kid with a horrible family and a boring life. Well, no, it turns out you're actually rich and famous and you've got magical powers. And yes, it's unrealistic, but it's a fantasy. It's meant to be unrealistic. Nobody wants to watch Harry Potter and the Crippling Anxiety, where we read about a non-magical Harry Potter who tries to work through his abandonment issues. Actually, I'm lying. I would totally read that. But anyway, fantasy presents an escape from an often boring and upsetting reality, and I don't think it's a negative escape at all. We need fantasies or we'd all go insane.
Now, much has been made of the casting of a woman as Rey, the new Luke. It is somehow considered to be a break from convention, while her, I don't know, let's just say character, is in fact perfectly boring and predictable, a hyper-empowered, purdy, feminist robot of implausibly infinite abilities. Rey is what by now has become a yawningly cliched stock character, the all
Necesito un poco de munición. Poniéndome en guardia. I can handle that.
Competent ingenue, or the ACI. Now, the ACI starts off as a low-status character whose endless and escalating waves of superlative competence quickly wash away any and all hints of reality or limitations. A superwoman fetish of automatic and unearned abilities, who ends up as little more than a delusional mangina hymn to bottomless female vanity. Rey, this film's ACI, turns out to be fantastic at hand-to-hand combat, flying various spaceships, sword fighting, using the Force, CGI cliff climbing, to name just a few.
So then, Rey as an all-competent ingenue, or to use a less annoying term, Rey as a Mary Sue character. Now I've seen this criticism of The Force Awakens a fair few times, and not just from Stefan. So is Rey a Mary Sue character? A Mary Sue here meaning a sort of hyper-competent, seemingly perfect character who has extensive and unrealistic skills. Well, to answer that, we first need to answer another question. What's the line that separates a Mary Sue character and just any protagonist of escapist fantasy fiction? You know, for instance, is Luke Skywalker a Mary Sue? So let's think about this further by running down the list of things that Stefan says Rey is fantastic at. Firstly, hand-to-hand combat.
Rey also regularly fights grown men trained from birth in the ways of combat, and wins easily. She weighs maybe a little over $110 and regularly takes down multiple 200-pound jacked-up monster warriors.
But when? There's only one time Rey fights hand-to-hand in the movie other than the concluding lightsaber duel, and that's when she fights these two dudes in the junkyard. And if I were being nitpicky here, I'd say it's technically not really hand-to-hand combat because she's armed with a big metal staff. She never fights unarmed in the movie. She's always got a blaster, a staff, or a lightsaber. And have you seen videos of Daisy Ridley's workouts? Now, I have. Purely for research purposes, you understand. And she's hardly a weak person. I mean, I'm over 200 pounds, and I wouldn't want her hitting me in the head with a big metal pole. And let's think about these guys. Like, who are these guys? They're wearing hoods and masks. We don't even know what species they are. We don't even know if they're men, actually. They could be anything under there for all we know. And they're unarmed. And I think Stefan missed this, but this scene is played as a joke. Finn sees Rey under attack and runs over to help, and halfway there he realises he doesn't have to. Now this scene is giving some information to the audience, you know, Rey knows how to fight with a staff, but there's also some comedy in Finn's unnecessary dash to help. And Finn's surprise that he doesn't need to help out only works as a joke if the audience has an understanding that it is a rare thing for women to be able to defend themselves in the way that Rey can. Anyway, next up, Rey is fantastic at flying spaceships and fixing the Falcon.
Rey, on the other hand, has spent her youth picking up garbage, Wall-E style, but is able to pull off the most ridiculous aerial maneuvers on an unfamiliar spaceship, outflying professional pilots trained from childhood.
So, Rey is apparently fantastic at flying various spaceships. Now, the only spaceship that Rey flies on screen, if we don't count this little speeder thing, is the Falcon. Now, first off, Stefan says that Rey has never flown a spaceship before.
So you see, boys trained from birth to fight are terrible at fighting. But girls who've never flown a spaceship are immediate experts who can outfly relentlessly trained pilots.
But this is directly contradicted by a line of dialogue in the movie.
That was shooting. Flying.
Thanks.
How did you do that?
I don't know.
No
I've
one
flown some
trained
ships, but I've never left the planet.
So Rey has flown ships before, and Stefan says that the Millennium Falcon is an unfamiliar spaceship for Rey. But I don't know why, because she seems to know a lot about it.
What about that ship?
That one's garbage. Gunner position is down there. This ship hasn't flown in years.
Who had it? Duquesne?
I stole it from Uncle Plutt. He stole it from the Irving boys who stole it from Duquesne.
Some moof milker put a compressor on the ignition line.
Uncle Plutt did. I thought it was a mistake too, puts too much stress on the hyperdrive.
You see, Rey works for this guy, who she was left with as a child. And he owns the Millennium Falcon, and that's how she knows about it. Now, Stefan goes on to be annoyed about how Rey knows how to fix a problem with the Falcon when Han didn't.
When standing with Han Solo at the controls of the Millennium Falcon, Rey fixes a problem that Han Solo cannot even identify. She also goes below deck to repair its malfunctioning innards. I mean, come on! Han Solo flew and maintained the Millennium Falcon for decades! Knew it inside and out! Then this vapid ACI wanders in with no knowledge of the complex spacecraft and knows exactly what to do to fix problems.
But I have a couple of explanations for this. First off, Rey is a scavenger who pokes around inside spaceships and strips them for parts, so I guess that gives you some knowledge about the mechanics of how spaceships work. Secondly, the problem with the Falcon is to do with a modification that happened after Han had lost the Falcon. You see, this guy, Rey's boss, made some of his own modifications. So since Rey was there when whatever it was modified, it stands to reason she'd know more about it than Han, and know how to undo it.
Additionally here, I remember it being played for a joke in Empire that Han is not exactly a complete authority on how to fix the Falcon.
I believe, sir, it says that the power coupling on the negative axis has been polarized. I'm afraid we'll have to replace it.
Well, of course I'll have to replace it.
Here, Chewie.
I think we better replace the negative power coupling.
Also, is Rey fantastic at flying the Falcon? You know, the first thing she does when she takes off is crash it into the ground. And then all of this stuff. And she can't get the shields up. And then the TIE fighters are landing shots on the Falcon. You see, this scene is the scene where the heroes learn to work together. And they barely scrape by. I think the movie's pretty good at showing that Rey and Finn are not that good at flying the Falcon, actually. This is not how a fantastic pilot flies a ship. Why didn't Stefan see any of this? I guess all the feminism got in the way. And there's a comparison to Luke to be made here. Luke is a farmer. Why does he know how to fly an X-Wing? And he seems to know all the controls and can identify problems with the ship.
R2, that stabilizer's broken loose again. See if you can't lock it down.
You know, why is Stefan seemingly more willing to accept Luke as a skilled pilot and not Rey? There's a similar amount of evidence for each. Early on we see them looking into the distance, dreaming of bigger things. They play with something that lets the audience know they want to be a pilot. There's a line of dialogue that lets the audience know they can fly.
We need a pilot!
We've got one! You bet I could. I'm not such a bad pilot myself. We don't have to sit here.
And that's about it. There's even a disbelieving line from Han about their piloting abilities.
But who's gonna fly it, kid? You?
Where's the pilot?
I'm the pilot.
You?
Luke and Rey are very similar in this regard. If we accept Luke as a pilot, we have to accept Rey as well. Next up, sword fighting.
It is nowhere explained how Rey gains her miraculous abilities to take on a master swordsman. Sword fighting is a pretty difficult and dangerous skill to acquire, as I remember from playing Macbeth. Rey simply has the skill and credibly engages in combat against a master swordsman. This is beyond ridiculous, and it is not a message I want my daughter to see.
So, sword fighting. Rey shouldn't be a match for Kylo Ren, who is a stronger Force user and trained with a lightsaber. And here's the thing. She isn't really a match for him. The odds have to be evened first in order to give her a shot. Now, Stefan doesn't mention it here, but Kylo Ren has just killed his father, so he's emotionally all messed up. And he's been shot in the gut with a weapon that the movie has went out of its way to make seem extremely powerful. Kylo is bleeding out, and he's punching himself in his wound, and he's just fought another lightsaber fight during which he was hit with a lightsaber. Also, he's not trying to kill Rey either, he just wants to turn her to the dark side.
You need a teacher! I could show you the ways of the Force!
And despite all of these disadvantages, Kylo is still the dominant fighter throughout the duel. Rey is running away from him for most of it, and I think this fight is great here actually. There's some excellent acting throughout it. Both Finn and Rey look genuinely scared of being hit by a lightsaber. And it's clear just from the fight choreography who the superior fighter is. Rey only wins because she remembers to use the Force in the end, which mirrors Luke using the Force at the end of A New Hope.
So Rey isn't a fantastic sword fighter really, she only barely squeaks out a win over an emotionally distraught opponent who's bleeding out with multiple injuries. But let's talk about her Force abilities.
Compare this effortless estrogen excellence to Luke Skywalker's slow grind to mastery. Luke had to work for 3 long films to even begin mastering the Force, apprenticing at the gnarled feet of Yoda for months at a time. Rey, on the other hand, she's a woman, see, she merely has to frown for 5 or 10 seconds in order to master the Force.
Now Stefan's problem here is that he's comparing Rey's character arc over 1 film to Luke's character arc over 3 films. You know, the new trilogy is only a third complete, remember? And given that Rey meets Luke at the end of The Force Awakens, I'm guessing she's gonna be training with him in the next film, like Luke trained with Yoda in Empire. Stefan should really be making comparisons to Luke's story in A New Hope. Luke had no extensive training in that film, he just got shot by a little shooty ball thing for a while. And he successfully uses the Force in that movie to make the killing shot on the Death Star. And I'd like to make a point here actually, what does Rey actually accomplish during the end of The Force Awakens? You know, Luke Skywalker starts the movie as a farm boy and ends it by almost single-handedly destroying the Death Star and saving the entire rebellion. Rey has no effect on the destruction of Starkiller Base, that's all Han, Chewie and Poe Dameron. All she does is defeat Kylo Ren, but the planet's already collapsing at that point, so it doesn't really affect much really. Luke's untrained use of the Force is much more impactful than Rey's is. Also, the Force is a magical power. One can't really make declarations about whether or not a character would be able to use magic as proficiently as they do in a work of fiction, because it's inherently unrealistic. We can only judge by the movie universe's internal rules. So, have any other characters in Star Wars been seen to use the Force without extensive training? Well, for starters, Anakin in Episode 1.
He has special powers.
Yes.
He can see things before they happen. That's why he appears to have such quick reflexes. It's a Jedi trait.
Now, someone might argue that this is because Anakin is exceptionally strong with the Force by birth because of some prophecy or whatever, but this raises a point. We don't know who Rey is yet. We don't know who her parents are. You know, maybe she was hidden on Jakku because of her incredible Force potential or something. We don't know. We'll have to wait until the other movies come out to learn more.
Here's another important point. Given the endless hyper-competence of modern women in movie and video game combat, how could women ever be the victims of physical violence in real life? 2 strong soldiers get their asses kicked by Rey. In the movie Salt, Angelina Jolie regularly throws her 95-pound stick-figure combat moves at giant neck-bearded men, beating them handily. Since this is all accepted as valid and empowering, how could there possibly be any such thing as rape culture? Or a patriarchy, for that matter? If women are victims, they must be weaker. But if they are weaker, they obviously cannot take on men twice their size and weight. Which is it, ladies? If you're victims, you cannot be fighters. If you're fighters, then you cannot be victims. And isn't it dangerous to endlessly...
Sure thing. That's one of the contacts we were looking for, but there are still others in the area.
We're green to go.
I can handle that. You know that was good. Got it covered.
Stepping off.
Alien neutralizado. Voy seco de munición. Blanco eliminado. Arma vacía, no puedo atacar. Ya estoy. Ven y verás. Locked and loaded.
Fight men twice their size? Why do women ever even bother calling the cops?
Well, because it's just a movie, Stefan. You see, the problem is you are only seeing Rey as a woman and taking her to be representative of all women instead of a character in her own right. You know, you're only seeing her gender. Just because a female movie character has a special skill doesn't mean that movie makers are saying all women have those skills. This is honestly a very silly argument that I think is below Stefan's usual standard, because it can so easily be reversed, you know. I don't see Stefan complaining about male characters' ability to fight, so why do men ever call the police? Why would men ever need help, since we can all apparently fight like Arnie or Rocky in the movies, you know? Silly argument.
Now, little has been made of an even more hardcore female hypocrisy in the movie. Finn, terrified of the monstrous intergalactic death cult that raised him to pretty much kill anyone not wearing a Teflon mask, wants to run away and hide on distant planets. Rey roundly condemns Finn for his cowardice, making that scornful World War I lemon-white feather face that indicates a complete denial of egg accessibility. However, shortly afterwards, Rey has an unpleasant vision and runs away, saying she wants to have nothing to do with fighting or the war or anything. In other words, Rey has nothing but contempt for Finn's fear of those who destroyed his childhood and have the power to destroy entire planets, while her fear of a bad dream is portrayed as perfectly legitimate. Hey, if I said you had a choice to go to war or have a bad dream, which would you take? It is only the modern Western cult of women are wonderful that blinds us to this bottomless hypocrisy.
So let's talk about Finn and Rey's attempts to run away. Now, Stefan seems to think that the movie presents Finn's desire to run away as cowardly, and Rey's desire to run away as completely.
No problem, boss. Moving to Overwatch. I'm going.
No idea where he's getting that from, to be honest. The movie presents both cases fairly neutrally, I think. It shows two characters running away, though one is determined and considered, and the other is panicked and overwhelmed. And the other characters all have opinions about that, but that's all. The movie itself makes no moral declarations about who's right or wrong. Rey just panics and runs away, and there's no judgment of that action. It's just what she does. Stefan is doing a special kind of expectant projecting here. He's not projecting his own opinions onto the movie. He's projecting an opinion he disagrees with onto the movie in order to disagree with it. I think the movie's siding with the woman over the man. How awful. I'm going to disagree with that anti-male bias. You know, it's absurd. Anyway, remember earlier when Stefan said that the movies show no negative effects of childhood trauma? Well, here it is, Stefan. Rey is so fixated on her past and returning to Jakku that when Maz tells her what she already knows, that her family are never coming back for her, she panics and flees. She's paralysed by her past and she can't move forward and accept the future. She can't let go of her childhood trauma of being abandoned. And we can say the same thing about Finn wanting to flee. He's been so traumatised by the First Order that he wants to run away rather than face them again. And what about Kylo Ren? You know, his whole thing is being emotionally traumatized. This, Stefan, is exactly what you were asking for earlier, but you missed it because you were fixated on an imagined anti-male bias.
Women are not wonderful. They are people. Anything else is sexism. Excessive praise arises from the same bigotry matrix as excessive criticism. Yes, pay attention, black people.
Now, I don't really have much to say about this. I include it here only to ask what it means. You know, at what point was Stefan making there? I genuinely can't figure it out. Answers in the comments, please.
Let us institute a test of movie masculinity called the Ball Crush test, which goes like this. Do men and women die in equal proportions? If not, is this not virulently anti-male sexism? Are there equal numbers of male and female villains? I'm guessing not. If there are female villains, is their villainy explained in a sympathetic backstory? Maleficent. Do male villains get the same sympathetic backstories? When male villains are killed, is their death more brutal than female villains? If male villains target women, are they depicted as more evil than the male villains who target men? Do women sacrifice themselves to save men? At least to the degree that men sacrifice themselves to save women. If these standards are not met, you're not watching a movie, you are watching anti-male war propaganda. Because it dehumanizes and objectifies men, let us deploy the ancient saying that the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their proper names. This is not art. This is warnography.
And that's my favourite part of every Stefan video right there, the last 5 seconds where he stares right at you with the intensity of a man trying to make your head explode using only his mind. So I want to address one part specifically here from Stefan's so-called ball crush test. And it's when he asks if male villains get sympathetic backstories, like, for instance, Maleficent. And again, this movie is entirely the wrong movie to make that point about, since yes, here, Kylo Ren is presented sympathetically. Kylo is my favourite character in the movie, honestly. I think it's incredibly clever to make him an angsty and unstable Vader fanboy. You know, he's a Vader copycat, obviously, but it's justified by his character, and I really appreciate that. But yeah, Kylo is not a moustache-twirling villain. He's an interesting guy, really, and he's got a surprising amount of depth and complexity, relative to the usual level of depth in Star Wars villains anyway. So I'd like to wrap up here with perhaps Stefan's weirdest point. And I didn't really understand this one, I don't think, so have a listen.
The resentments against men harbored by abandoned boys and their bitter, clinging single mothers showed up in the all-male evil of the Empire and the endless phallic symbols scattered throughout the movie, from Darth Vader's helmet to lightsabers to the insemination sequence of navigating a dangerous trench to drop a tiny sperm into a giant Death Star egg, in which birth is destruction. The modern semi-socialist state made necessary by the collapse of Western families, the welfare state is in reality the single mother state, is shown by the giant Death Star egg, which has the capacity to destroy entire civilizations, as unleashed and state-subsidized female hypergamy has repeatedly done throughout human history.
Now this is kind of a weird take, and I don't really know what to make of it, you know, the Death Star as the welfare state? It seems like a contradiction of what Stefan says prior to that about the all-male Empire representing a hatred of men. So the Empire are all male because abandoned boys and single mothers harbour resentments against men. So men have to be the bad guys, but the evil men built the welfare state, the Death Star, and they're using its power of unleashed female hypergamy to destroy civilizations. Did I get that right? I honestly have no idea. Either way, and I'm sorry to say, I really am, but this comparison is really just very silly. You know, to look at the Death Star and say, yeah, well that thing is clearly bad and evil, so it therefore must represent the things that I don't like in real life, such as the welfare state and women. It's a laughably direct comparison to draw. You see that the bad thing is blowing up the planet. Well, that's bad. And if you think about it, that's basically what women do, isn't it? You know, it's kind of like what women do, that is, with the welfare state. They blow up the planet with their hypergamy. Nonsense. Thanks a lot for watching. Sorry to go back to the well with Stefan so quickly, especially with so many other channels to get to, but I couldn't stop thinking about him, to be honest. It's those eyes. I get lost in them. Remember to like and subscribe. Well, if you liked it anyway. And there's a donation link on the YouTube banner there, so maybe click it for a complete laugh, you absolute madman, you. And stay tuned for more rubbish.
Location confirmed. On my way.
Hello everyone, this
I can handle that. Time for me to go.
Getting out of here. Five and number.
Voy a ello. Seems doable. Solid copy. Okay, I'll go.
I'm on it. Not a problem.
Just in time. Ready to boogie.
Heading home. Evac confirmed.
Listo para bailar. I'm going.
All XCOM operatives are secure. Firebrand is returning to base.
Years of peace and prosperity will not be undone by the reckless actions of a few misguided dissidents today. We stand with the elders, trust in their wisdom, and we shall overcome this crisis.
The aliens sure know how to turn a planet into a Halloween theme park. Zombie swarms. Just what we needed.
Ghostbusters reboot movie that came out this year. Now, I just watched this movie recently, and it was a little bit rubbish, to be honest. Was it the worst movie ever made? No. It had a lot of problems, but there were a few things I liked about it too, so I guess overall I'd call it mediocre. And that's not a good place to be for a comedy movie. I mean, something either makes you laugh or it doesn't, and for the most part, this movie just didn't make me laugh. Now, the original 1984 Ghostbusters movie was really good, and the new movie is in most respects just a remake of that one, so I thought it'd be interesting to compare the two. Now, in a lot of ways, discussing comedy can be quite difficult, you know. People have different senses of humour and they find different things funny. Some people like understated, character-driven comedies, and some people are objectively wrong. So to save myself from saying, in my opinion, roughly 100 times, I'll just leave a disclaimer here that all my declarative sentences about what is and is not funny, they're my own opinions, you're free to disagree. And I annoyingly have to make a brief note here about the controversy surrounding the release of the movie. The internet was pretty mad about this movie before it even came out, and a lot of dumb people said a lot of dumb things. So let's first off list some points which are not the reason that the movie isn't good. 1, because it's got women in it. No, that doesn't matter at all. 2, because of Leslie Jones or any other actor or actors. No, everyone who's in the movie is at least a capable actor. Miscast? Maybe, arguable, but this wasn't the fault of the actors. 3, because of how poorly it was marketed, the awful trailer, or anything else. And there's a lot to talk about there, but I'm only interested in what's actually in the movie right now. So what were the actual reasons? Well, after quickly googling how to analyse movies, I've identified a few key areas where I think the reboot underperforms compared to the original. Firstly, the script. Certain things are missing, and certain things are in there that don't need to be. Secondly, the characters. Characterization's very patchy, and the characters break character too easily. And thirdly, the editing, and this is the big one for me personally. The movie was edited by someone who, I'm sorry to say, is not good at identifying things which are funny. Now, the main problem with the comedy in this comedy movie is that it appears to have been written, directed and edited with the following principle in mind. Jokes are funny, right, so the more jokes you do, the funnier it is. Comedy doesn't work that way, I'm afraid. The movie has a lot of funny moments, but they're stifled by the surrounding unfunny moments. Comedy to a large extent relies on establishing and maintaining a mood, and it's better to have no joke at all than a bad joke that kills the mood. Bad jokes prey on good jokes and eat them. But we'll talk more about that in a little while. Let's first talk briefly about the story. Now, both the new movie and the original broadly follow the same basic plot. Some scientists who believe in ghosts get kicked out of their college or colleges, develop technology to catch ghosts, start a ghost-catching business, and then they have to face off against some larger paranormal threat, and they end up saving the city. Now, the new Ghostbusters makes a few changes to the particulars of the storyline, some of which are fine, but some of which I think actively harm the story. Now, the worst of these for me was having the government already know about the ghosts and engaging in a conspiracy to cover them up.
And we're not frauds, we are legitimate scientists.
Let me interrupt you. We know you're not frauds, because we have been monitoring this situation quite closely.
Agents Hawkins and Rourke are with Homeland Security, so we've been investigating this extremely quietly.
You see, this kind of robs the Ghostbusters of their unique thing for me. You know, the ghost thing. In the old Ghostbusters, the government, represented by the mayor and Walter Peck, they don't believe in ghosts, and they've got to be convinced of it. In the new movie, when the Ghostbusters meet the mayor, he's like, yeah, ghosts, we know. And it's like, oh, well, I guess people already know about ghosts then, that kinda makes the Ghostbusters less special. And I'm just going to quickly run through some other structural or storyline changes that I felt were detrimental. Patty joins the Ghostbusters for no reason. In the first movie, Winston just walked in looking for a job. In the new movie, Patty is one of the Ghostbusters' first customers.
And that's fine by itself, there's nothing wrong with that. I might even like that more than the original, if they gave Patty a solid reason to actually want to join the Ghostbusters. It feels like there was a scene cut where Patty got fired over the ghost thing, you know. Maybe she keeps telling customers about the ghost, or her boss fires her for bringing the Ghostbusters there, or something like that. So then she joins the Ghostbusters because they're the only ones who believe her about the ghost. Instead, she just turns up and demands a job for no clear reason. Me if there's a deleted scene of Patty getting fired, to be honest. No money issues. In the original Ghostbusters, Venkman talks Stantz into Stantz? 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 Is that how you say that? I've written it here, I've never said it out loud. Stantz. In the original Ghostbusters, Bill Murray talks Dan Aykroyd into taking out an extra mortgage on his house to finance the start of the business. And they're basically broke when they get their first real job. And I like this finance element, it's largely missing from the new movie. They don't even bill the theatre guy for catching the demon ghost thing there, and there's no explanation for how they're able to finance developing all the ghost tech. No getting famous montage. In the original movie there's a montage scene of the Ghostbusters in the media, completing more jobs, and generally showing the passage of time. In the new movie, they catch one ghost and they're immediately on the news and famous, and I don't know, it just felt a bit rushed. Too much action near the end of the movie, and this is in turn a problem with the structure, the editing, and just the overall general direction, but whatever, I'm putting it here. In the original Ghostbusters, what action there was always served the needs of the story or the comedy. The action scene near
of both human and alien genetic material. I must admit, this reptilian creature with such distinctive human features is surprisingly unsettling. Invasion-era reports include references to a species with some reptilian qualities, but nothing as readily apparent as this. While most of my involvement in the chip development process was on the theoretical side, I can't help but feel some degree of responsibility for the final product as we see it in use today. When intent
movie goes on entirely too long and serves no real purpose beyond showing off a bunch of special effects. That, and there's a few genuinely embarrassing moments featuring Holtzman, but we'll get to her in a bit. Now, all of these are flaws, but none of them are really movie killers. They'd all be excusable if the movie were funnier. So let's talk about why it wasn't. And here's what I think is the most glaring problem with the comedy in the new Ghostbusters movie. Everyone tries to be funny. Almost every single character, large or small, is played for laughs in a very overstated way. Now, in the original Ghostbusters movie, the only character to intentionally crack jokes, at any point, I think, is Venkman. Every single other character's played pretty much straight. Scenes with Venkman and one other character resemble a classic double act routine, with Venkman as the comic and the other character, whoever it is, as the straight man. Not that the other characters aren't funny. Janine is funny. Egon is funny. This hotel attendant trying to hide the ghost from the guests is funny, but they're not trying to be funny. The humour comes from their characters and the situation that they're in. The contrast of characters can be a funny joke in and of itself. Stantz walks out of the elevator tense and serious, and Venkman follows calmly. Now, neither is funny by itself, but together the contrast gets a laugh. Or consider Venkman's introductory scene where Venkman is lying to the two students about the results of an ESP test. Now, no one is trying to be funny in this scene. No one's saying funny things, it's just a funny situation. We're learning about Venkman's character. He's manipulative, he's selfish, he doesn't take his work seriously, And the humour comes from the simple dramatic irony of the audience being able to see the cards while the students can't. Now in the new Ghostbusters movie, well, all the Ghostbusters are played funny nearly all the time for a start, but so is almost every other character. This tour guide has to be funny, the FBI guy has to be funny, the college dean has to be funny, the food delivery man even has to be funny. Even the antagonist has to be funny.
And then the world shall bend to okay. I apologize, that looks nastier than I intended.
One of the only characters to be played straight is the old-fashioned Dean of Columbia University, played by Charles Dance, who, not so coincidentally, says probably my favourite line in the movie.
Dr. Bronston saw this on Reddit. It was reblogged from a site entitled Ghost News. Not a publication I'd heard of.
Now, the derision with which he says reblogged from a site entitled Ghost News is funny because we know his character from earlier and understand that he would hate to say that sentence. At no point does Charles Dance break character and start riffing and telling awful jokes. And speaking of, let's talk about the Ghostbusters themselves. Now, the early scenes in the new Ghostbusters actually gave me hope that it was going to be really good. The opening conflict between Erin and Abby is completely fine in my opinion. I feel like we get a sense of who these characters are at the start of the movie. You know, Erin is high-strung, she takes herself and her work seriously, she believes in ghosts but doesn't want anyone to know. Abby is less serious, believes in ghosts and wants to prove it, and she's angry at Erin for a perceived betrayal. You know, it's not Hamlet by any means, but the original Ghostbusters characters weren't Hamlet either. You know, they're fine characters for a comedy movie about ghosts. They're even given a pretty deep personal reason.
A las coordenadas designadas. Vista en el objetivo. Heading there now. Scanning. Moving. Hostiles making the rounds. Moving out. Got it covered. So it is decided.
Got it.
Eyes on the prize.
Locking it down.
Confirmado. Recibido. Estoy vigilando. Ruling.
Ghosts exist.
When I was 8 years old, the mean old lady that lived next door died. And that night, I woke up and she was standing at the foot of my bed, just staring at me. She did that every night for almost a year.
Which I thought was a bit serious and probably overkill, but, you know, I'm not really complaining. And early on, there's some okay to actually pretty good moments with these characters. I like when Erin's arguing with this guy and pretending that she didn't write the book. I like her trying to hide her monitor from Charles Dance. I like Abby and Erin arguing about the book. You know, it's not hilarious or anything, but it's fine character building. Now, the big letdown for me is how quickly the movie was willing to completely abandon these characters. For example, at one point, a paranormal skeptic played by a very tired-looking Bill Murray comes to see the ghosts they captured. Then Erin, because she wants to prove ghosts exist so much, lets the ghost out, and it murders Bill Murray. So the Ghostbusters essentially kill a man, which is weird enough by itself, to be honest, but then not 10 seconds later.
Who threw him out the window?
A ghost threw him out the window.
Oh, you mean like Patrick Swayze? Like he's sitting behind you making some pottery?
Yeah, like Patrick Swayze. That's it. And then we were all dancing at a summer camp in the Catskills, and then we sat down, and he was behind me, and we made a vase.
Oh, you're combining the two.
I combined a couple of Swayze
Oh, you know what was a good one? Roadhouse.
I loved Roadhouse.
Point Break.
He was a Point Break.
Come on, at the end with the big wave.
Now, why are they doing a little Patrick Swayze movie riff bit with this police officer? They just saw someone die. And I'm thinking, well, they just caused the death of a man. Why don't they care about that? All the early scenes established Erin as a self-serious person who was sensitive to what other people think about her, but at the first chance to do some jokey jokes, that all gets tossed out. And I mean, if they're not going to bother trying to have consistent characterization, they may as well just have characters with seemingly no motivation whatsoever who act completely randomly all the time. And speaking of, let's talk about Holtzman. Now, Holtzman isn't developed enough to even be called a character, really. She's a character trait. She's wacky. When she's introduced, she's not really given a clear motivation, but she seems pretty excited about going to see a ghost, so I'm thinking, okay, she wants to see a ghost. That's her thing. But when she does see a ghost...
How can you be eating right now? Won't you pop?
So I'm thinking, oh, she doesn't care about seeing a ghost then? But now she seems excited she saw a ghost again? Like, what is she doing? What is this character ever doing? In fact, almost every time Holtzman was on screen when I watched this movie, I was solely wondering what she was doing and why. She's like a character void. It's impossible to have an opinion about Holtzman. And the sad thing here is that all it would have taken was a few lines of exposition at her introduction to give her some grounding in reality. You know, you can do the wacky scientist thing, and well, I mean, Egon in the original movie was that to an extent, but underneath all the wackiness you still need to have an actual identifiable human. Of course, Holtzman is given a few lines of humanizing dialogue in the movie that ground her a little.
I didn't think that I would ever really have a friend until I met Abby, and then I feel like I have a family, we have my own, and I love it. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, that was like a real thing right there. That was like so real.
And Patty's right, that was so real right there. If only something like that could have came near the start of the movie instead of 5 minutes from the end, so I didn't waste 2 hours wondering if Holtzman was human or not. And as for Patty, I don't have too much to say about her, to be honest. She's fine overall, except, oddly enough, for everything that they put in the trailer. She does break character least often out of any of the Ghostbusters, so she gets a point for that. And speaking of Holtzman and characters who aren't really characters, Kevin, who is stupid. So stupid as to not even be a human, actually. I mentioned earlier that I think Hemsworth was miscast. Not because he's not funny, though he isn't in this. I mean, he might be a funny guy elsewhere, but in this he's dreadful. No, I think he's miscast because he's too famous, and he thus gets way too much screen time for what should be a minor character. You can have a minor character who's incredibly stupid, that's fine, but having several scenes that focus solely on that character where the only joke is that they are stupid, well, that gets tedious very quickly. And maybe it's just me, but a lot of the jokes where the punchline is, Kevin is stupid, are a little stupid.
Would it be okay if I bring my cat to work sometimes? He has major anxiety problems.
You know what? I would love to let your cat live here with you, but I have a pretty severe cat allergy.
Oh, I don't have a cat. He's a dog. His name's my cat.
Your dog's name is my cat?
And Mike Hat.
Your dog's name is Mike, last name Hat.
Well, his full name is Michael Hat.
What the hell are they even talking about, honestly? Just because he's dumb doesn't mean the writing has to be dumb. You can have a cleverly constructed joke about a character being stupid.
Okay, one last time. These are small, but the ones out there... Small, far away.
A character being stupid should really be the means by which a joke is told, rather than the punchline in and of itself. There's only one thing Kevin says in the movie that actually got a laugh out of me, and that's just because it's a line lifted out of the original.
What do you want?
Ghostbusters, what do you want?
So just to be fair here, before I move on to talk about editing, I'd like to point out some moments that I actually really enjoyed in the new movie. I like when Erin's trying to warn the mayor about what's going to happen.
Oh no. What's happening? Okay, that's a dumpster, but...
I like when this thing starts spinning around really fast.
I didn't even know it did that.
I like when the camera footage cuts to a YouTube video playing in Charles Dance's office. I like when Abby goes to hit the bomb like a baseball and misses. Although it's not edited very well, but whatever, I like the idea, so I'll give it a pass. I like when Erin is having a tantrum and picks up the bomb to throw it, and Abby and Holtzman freak out. Maybe I just think bombs are funny, I don't know. Now all of these at least got a smile out of me, but if you notice something about all these moments, they're all physical comedy. And the new movie is generally at its strongest when it keeps the humour non-verbal. Which is the nicer way around of saying that the movie's at its weakest when the characters talk. And bugger me, do they talk.
No, I know that's what they're saying, but I'm saying the cat's already out, so it's hard to put the cat back in the... But that's why they have that saying, because if the cat is out of the bag, you can't put it back in the bag.
I put a cat in a bag all the time.
And talk and talk until any actual comedy present's been run into the ground. A few visuals actually get ruined to a certain degree because the characters just won't shut up for 5 seconds. Let's look at one instance of the same joke that's in both the old Ghostbusters and the new.
Let's get ready. Switch me on.
All right, turning the machine on. Woo! Boy, she's got an impressive purr.
Okay, so...
The same visual joke, recoiling from the proton pack being turned on, has much less impact in the new movie because for whatever reason someone involved in the production decided that Melissa McCarthy should be yelling over the top of it. And the constant talking isn't just background noise, the reluctance to edit it out or cut away from it artificially extends the runtime of a whole bunch of scenes long past the point where the joke's dead. And there's a lot of these scenes, but we're just going to be looking at a select few. First up is Patty delivering the hearse. So fundamentally, what, if anything, is the funny thing about this scene? Well, on one level, it's a simple reversal of expectation. The other Ghostbusters weren't expecting the car to be a hearse, and then the car is a hearse. Now, as a British man, that's enough for me. I'm happy with that right there. You've got your reversal of expectation, a little irony in the fact that the Ghostbusters drive a hearse. Job done. Now the problem is, this premise isn't funny enough to sustain a full conversation about it. Now for all the non-British people in the audience, I'll allow the premise one more joke maybe, like the following.
Hope you checked to see there wasn't a body in the bag.
I don't think so. I don't really know.
You didn't check?
I mean, I was in a hurry. I checked to see if we had gas. That was more important.
Now if I were editing this scene, I would have cut to the next scene right there. Erin jokes that there might be a body in the back of the hearse, and it turns out that Patty doesn't actually know if there's a body in the back of the hearse. It's not exactly a knee slapper, but it's good enough, that is, until the premise gets stretched way too thin.
So there is a body?
Let Holtzman check. She likes that type of stuff.
Yeah, I can think of 7 good uses of a cadaver today.
No, Dr. Frankenstein. We gotta turn in the body if there's one in there. Don't do that.
Too many times when I was watching this movie, I was just waiting for the characters to stop talking so that the story would progress. Let's look at another example like this, and while you're watching, have a think about where you would put the cut to the next scene.
This is an institution of higher learning. And if you guys want to study ghosts, do it somewhere else, because I have 2 words for you.
Let me guess, get out? No, he's gonna say suck it. He's not gonna say suck it.
Suck it.
You were right.
You know, oh my gosh. I think it might be a ghost. Oh no, it's not, it's just a bird. Bye, there's the door. Later days. Can you hear this? Let me turn it up.
Oh my God.
This just goes to show that the Chosen are vulnerable and we can take them down. We just have to figure out how to keep them down.
Immature behavior.
Caught it.
Just a minor setback.
No, guys, I think we can really do this.
Go. Doesn't it? So what's the comedic element to this scene? It's that you'd expect the dean of a university to be very professional and mature, a bit like Charles Dance, say, but this dean is very unprofessional and immature. So what you want to do, once the scene's fulfilled its narrative purpose, is cut on the most emphatic instance of that. And if we do that...
This is an institution of higher learning. And if you guys want to study ghosts, do it somewhere else, because I have 2 words for you.
Let me guess, get out? No, he's gonna say suck it. He's not gonna say suck it.
Suck it.
Just a minor setback.
No, guys, I think we can really do this.
And would you look at that? That's much better. And let's look at another scene that's in desperate want of editing. Aaron gets fired by Charles Dance after he sees the YouTube video. And then there's an awful drawn out scene of Aaron walking down a hallway pretending to not have been fired to everyone. And it's unnecessary, and it's crap, and it goes on forever. Now in the original Ghostbusters, Stantz and Venkman get fired by the dean and we immediately cut to them drinking outside. And we get it, they've been fired. We don't need it spelled out. It's funnier if it happens off screen. You could cut the firing just implied with something like this.
Ghosts are real! Ghosts are real! I believe in ghosts because I just saw when they're real!
Who is that?
Well, I hope you're happy. That video you posted got me fired.
Sony, send me all the raw footage. I'll cut a good movie out of it, I promise. It'll only be 40 minutes long, but it'll be really good. Now the first Ghostbusters movie was much more sparing with the dialogue, and they knew how to cut away after a good line.
Do you have any hobbies?
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
If that line was in the new movie, they'd probably follow it with 45 seconds of awful improv riffing about fungus. Now I don't know where the problems with this movie originated, in the writing, the direction, the acting, or wherever, but if there's bad jokes in there, then it needed an editor with the ability to cut them out. And that just didn't happen, I'm afraid. Overall, I'd call Ghostbusters 2016 a spooktacular summer hit that the whole family can enjoy. 9 stars. Hello guys, who's ready to get ourselves involved in some YouTube drama? Gee, I can't wait. So I got a comment recently on one of my CinemaSins videos, which is always very exciting. It was left by a guy called Owen Bosveld, and he says, "Man, you must religiously watch their videos to be able to nitpick like that. Do you have anything better to do? Maybe go after Leafy is here." Now first off, That's a silly question, because no, I clearly don't have anything better to do. But since I don't have anything better to do, I went and had a quick Google of Leafy is Here. I found his channel, I went to the videos tab, I sorted by the oldest, and I started watching. So, who is Leafy is Here? Well, if you watch his oldest videos, he seems like any other teenager, making silly videos for YouTube, you know, he's playing Minecraft, he's making personal videos about himself and his life, he's doing cute little skits with his friends, and he's ranting about fake people and douchebags like a regular little Holden Caulfield. And my first reaction to all this was one of strong nostalgia for when I was a teenager, because this is exactly what I was like. Leafy's story videos are brilliantly exaggerated and overly dramatic. For example, in The Story of When I Met a Real-Life Paedophile, all caps, Leafy tells a story about when he used to know two people. One was a teenage girl who was under the age of consent, and the other was a 21-year-old man. And one time, the 21-year-old indicated he was attracted to the girl. And what happened next? Well, nothing. That's about it. It took me about 10 seconds to tell that story. But when Leafy tells it, it's a 17-minute epic with twists and turns and hyperbole and meandering narrative cul-de-sacs that end up going absolutely nowhere, and it's great. Another time, Leafy saw a homeless guy with an iPad. That's it, that's the whole story. It's a 6-minute video and nothing happens. And honestly, I'm not making fun here. I genuinely think this is brilliant, and I was really sitting there with a big nostalgia grin on my face, remembering when I was a teenager and I thought I was the centre of the universe and everything that happened to me was important. So anyway, at this point I'm thinking, this guy seems basically harmless. You know, what's there to go after here? Did my favourite subscriber, Owen Bosveld, send me on a wild goose chase? But, as stated, I have nothing better to do, so I kept watching. And as I kept watching, I noticed something of a change over time in Leafy's videos. He makes fewer and fewer story videos and videos about himself and his hobbies, and more videos poking fun at other YouTubers and Twitch streamers until, as we get closer to the present day, that's all he's doing. You know, videos like the cringiest kid to ever touch the internet, the cringiest kid to ever live on the entire planet, the cringiest kid on the entire internet. I hope he's a different kid than the first kid, because you're kinda doubling up there. The cringiest kid to ever exist in the entire universe, the cringiest kid to ever live on this world, the cringiest kid to ever exist on YouTube ever, the cringiest kid to ever exist tries to get some ass, the cringiest... You know what, you get the point, he's got a formula. He watches some dumb video made by a 12-year-old, and then he spends 10 minutes screeching about how dumb they are. And then you just give the video a silly clickbaity title and there you go, instant YouTube money. Now if we ignore the fact that he's lazily making fun of children, I kind of feel for Leafy a little bit. I guess he ran out of stories to tell, or maybe he couldn't think of other things to make videos about. And this is the other side of the teenage nostalgia coin, I guess. Insecurity and low self-esteem making you act like a little prick. Now Leafy's audience is primarily teenage boys, so naturally, another frequent target of Leafy's videos is women. And you know, I get it, I was a teenager once, and adolescent boys have what we'll charitably call a complicated attitude towards women. You know, they're frightening and amazing, and you love them, but you hate them, and you desperately want one to touch you, but you hate them.
Neutralizado. fuerzas de Advent sobre el terreno. ¡Maldición! ¡Hay que cubrirse!
I bring justice! Weapon ammunition is low.
¡Allá voy! ¡Los tengo encima!
Ammunition depleted.
¡A la orden! ¡Enemigo eliminado! ¡Me quedo sin munición en el arma!
I must reload.
¡Estoy preparado! ¡Me muevo a la posición! ¡En marcha! Blanco hostil abatido. Alien neutralizado. El disparo no ha dado. ¡Munición en las últimas!
Weapon depleted. I must have ammunition.
Blanco eliminado. He recargado. No tengo munición. Ven y verás.
Non-evade detection.
A la orden.
I will watch.
Poniéndome en guardia. ¿No oís nada?
Reloading weapon.
ello voy. ¡Enemigos en movimiento! ¡Tiro desviado!
Soon to be out of ammunition. Reloading ammunition. Fire ammunition.
Blanco hostil abatido. Alien neutralizado. Poca munición. Enemigo eliminado. Preparado. Munición agotada. Blanco neutralizado. ¡Guardia!
I stand ready.
Me muevo a la posición.
No armor penetration.
Blanco eliminado.
It's under my watch.
A ello voy. Todo cubierto.